"Grandma, you can't sit here. Mom said you're an old burden, and we don't want no bodies at the table." Those were the exact words my 13-year-old granddaughter said to me. She didn't whisper it. She didn't hesitate. She didn't even look embarrassed. She said it loudly, confidently, like she had every right to dismiss me from my own family. And then, they laughed. Not strangers, not random people in a restaurant. My own family. My son, the child I raised on my own. The boy I once carried through fevers, scraped knees, broken dreams. He laughed too. I stood there, with my hand still on the back of the chair, frozen in disbelief. Everyone at that table had space. They just didn't have space for me. There's a kind of pain that doesn't hit your heart. It hits your spine. It leaves you stiff, silent, numb. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply nodded, turned, and walked away. I wanted them to remember that silence. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than anger. I heard her giggle as I walked off. I heard my son whisper, "She's being dramatic. Mom will be back." They didn't know that was the moment everything changed. Not for them. For me. I sat in my car in the parking lot, listening to nothing. Not music, not the engine, just the sound of my own breath. I thought of all the years I helped them, all the bills I paid, all the nights I babysat, all the holidays I cooked, all the sacrifices I made that nobody ever saw. And suddenly, something inside me snapped into focus. I realized I wasn't a burden. I was their backbone. They just didn't see it, because I never made them stand without me. The moment of change. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A text from my son. Payment still due tomorrow. Like nothing had happened. Like I was just a bank machine, with gray hair. Normally, I would have replied instantly. "Yes, I'll handle it," but not this time. This time I replied with 3 simple words. "Figure it out." And those 3 words brought the entire house to its knees, the next morning. Because while they viewed me as a nobody, they were about to find out I was the someone their whole life depended on. When I got home that night, I sat in my living room surrounded by memories, pictures on the wall, drawings from school, handmade birthday cards. All the pieces of my life I poured into raising a child who eventually forgot what I once meant to him. Let me take you back, not to make you pity me, but to help you understand where my pain came from. I didn't grow up with much. My family was poor. Work was hard. Life wasn't gentle. When I became a mother, I was determined to give my son more than I ever had. I worked long shifts at a sewing factory, sometimes leaving home at 5 in the morning and returning when the moon was already high and tired in the sky. I remember changing worn-out shoes and sewing my own clothes so he could have something new. There were nights I didn't eat dinner so I could save enough money to pay for his school notebooks. He was my joy, my reason, my entire world. His father left us early. It was just me and him, and I never complained. I was proud to struggle if it meant my boy would rise. When he was 8, he had a serious fever. I stayed beside him for 3 nights straight, feeding him water with a spoon, praying silently that he would make it through. When he was 12, he ran home crying because someone called him worthless. I held him and told him, "Your worth is not measured by what others say. Never forget that." Funny enough, decades later, I was the one who needed to hear those exact words. When he finished high school, we celebrated with a cake I paid for using the last of that month's budget. I didn't even have bus fare the next day. I walked to work, and I would do it all again. In a heartbeat. That is what motherhood is. I never told him about the overtime hours. I never told him about the tears I cried in the bathroom, so he wouldn't see me weak. I never told him about the loneliness that came from raising a child alone. To him, everything just happened, as if it was easy. Children rarely understand what parents survive for them. And back then, I thought, maybe when he grows up, he'd understand. But adulthood came, marriage came, children came, and somewhere along the way, I stopped being seen as a person. I became a convenient resource, not loved, not valued, not respected, simply used. When he married, they dreamed of a big home. I helped them with the down payment. When they struggled with bills, I stepped in quietly. When their roof leaked, I paid to have it repaired. They never asked, but they never refused either. Then the mortgage came, heavy and unforgiving. And once again, I helped. And I didn't mind helping, because that's what mothers do. But there was something I never expected, that the same support I gave would one day become the reason they believed they could treat me like nothing. Because dependency breeds entitlement, and entitlement kills gratitude. Sitting in my living room that night, I realized I had enabled their blindness. I had taught them that I was unbreakable, so they assumed I was unfeeling. I had shown them strength, so they forgot I could hurt. I had shown them generosity, so they treated it like obligation. I had given them love silently, so they assumed silence meant acceptance. But it didn't. That moment in the restaurant, when my granddaughter called me a nobody, that wasn't born in a single sentence. It was a generation of disrespect that I unintentionally allowed. And as I sat there, surrounded by photos of all the things I had done for them, a truth washed over me. I didn't lose their respect that night. I lost it long ago, when I let them take without teaching them to value. That night, after leaving the restaurant and coming home, I didn't turn on the lights right away. I just stood in the dark hallway, holding my purse like it was the only familiar thing left in the world. It's surprising how quickly a single moment can replay itself again and again inside your head. I could still hear her voice. "We don't want nobodies at the table." The laughter, the dismissive tone, the lack of hesitation. And then, I heard his whisper, the one that hurt almost as much as her words, "Mom will come back, she always does." To them, I was predictable, unshakable, replaceable. They thought my heart was made of stone, but the truth is, it was made of scars. I sat at my dining table, staring at the wooden surface where I had served meals for people who now didn't see what I once meant to them. It wasn't anger washing over me, it was clarity. I thought about calling him. I thought about correcting my granddaughter. I thought about demanding an apology. But then I stopped. I asked myself, what would that change? Would they respect me because I shouted, or would they respect me because they finally understood my worth? Respect forced is not respect earned. And I realized something. I had never required respect from them. I had only offered support. And in doing so, I taught them that my dignity was optional. That realization was heavier than anything anyone had ever said to me. When he was young, maybe 6 or 7, he once called me Supermom. We were sitting together, and he put his little arms around my neck and said, "I want to grow up and make you proud." That little boy grew into a man, but somewhere between life, mortgages, bills, marriage, he forgot the woman who was always in his corner. I wondered, did I raise him to be emotionally blind? Did I fail him? Did I teach him everything except gratitude? These were questions no mother ever wants to ask herself. But that night, I did. The house was too quiet. And silence is the kind of sound that can make you feel more alone than you ever thought possible. I made myself tea, not because I wanted to drink it, but because I needed to hold something warm, something comforting. And I whispered to myself, "You are not a nobody. You are not a burden. You are not dismissed." For the first time in a long time, I spoke kindly to myself, not as a mother, not as a grandmother, but as a person, someone who mattered, someone who had lived, loved, sacrificed, persevered. Hours passed, but sleep didn't come. And then, just before midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from my son, payment still due tomorrow. No apology, no concern, no acknowledgement of what happened, just the expectation that I would pay, as always. It hit me like a cold wave. I wasn't valued, I was a utility. They didn't fear losing my love. They only feared losing my financial help. And suddenly, everything became crystal clear. I held the phone, staring at the screen, and a calm washed over me. Not anger, clarity. For the first time, I understood something powerful. I had been giving without boundaries, and they had been taking without gratitude. And I typed back 3 simple words: figure it out. When I pressed send, I didn't shake. I didn't cry. I just breathed. Because in that moment, I took back something I had lost years ago, my dignity. I knew they would panic. I knew tomorrow would bring consequences. I knew the house of cards they built would tremble. But I wasn't acting out of revenge. Not even close. I wasn't trying to hurt them. I was finally protecting myself. That night, I didn't sleep well. Not because I was sad, but because my mind was unwinding years of emotional exhaustion. I realized I had spent decades holding up people who never learned to stand on their own. And the guilt I carried, the guilt for not being enough, didn't belong to me. It belonged to them. That night wasn't painful because of what they said. It was painful because I finally understood the truth behind it. And that truth, that awakening, changed everything. Let me be completely honest. Money has always been the shadow in my life that I didn't want to look at, but never could escape. I didn't grow up wealthy. I didn't marry wealthy. And when I became a mother, I poured everything into my children. Every dollar, every sacrifice, every dream I had for myself disappeared into making sure they were okay. So when I stood outside that house, cold, silent, trembling, after being rejected from my granddaughter's birthday dinner, the part that crushed me wasn't just emotional humiliation, it was the financial reality I could no longer hide. The truth about my situation: at my age, I live mostly on Social Security and a very small pension from the hospital I worked in for over 30 years. It barely covers rent, let alone medication, food, or emergencies. I don't travel, I don't splurge, I don't buy name-brand clothes. Every penny has a purpose. And even then, I fall short. There are nights I go to bed worrying whether the power bill will get paid, whether medication will run out, whether I'll be able to afford groceries next week. I don't tell anyone this. I don't complain, I just manage, the way mothers do. But my children don't know that. Or maybe they do, and they just don't care. The painful thought I couldn't ignore. As I stood walking away from that party, I thought, would they treat me differently if I had money? Would they respect me more if I had something to offer? Because the truth is, in today's world, you're only loved when you're useful, when you can babysit, when you can help with bills, when you can offer a loan, when you can pay for dinner. But the moment you aren't financially beneficial, you become invisible, disposable, an old burden. Back when I could still work overtime, everybody loved me. They came over for dinners, they borrowed money with promises they never kept. They always needed help, and I always gave it, not because I had much, but because I believed that helping family builds love. Now I see. I was wrong. Money doesn't build love. Money builds dependency. And once the money is gone, so is the love. About 2 months before the party, I asked my daughter for a small loan, just $50, to help with a prescription. She didn't even look up from her phone when she answered, "Mom, you're always struggling. Why don't you plan better?" Plan better? After all those years working 3 shifts? After paying her college tuition so she could have a better life? After raising her child so she could return to work? That statement didn't break me because of the $50. It broke me because she didn't care enough to even ask what the medicine was for. At this point in my life, if I get sick, I'm alone. If I run out of food, I'm alone. If I fall behind on bills, I'm alone. Not because they aren't capable, but because they don't see me as valuable. I am not mom anymore. I am not grandma. I am simply someone past my usefulness. And do you know what that does to a person? It destroys dignity. It destroys self-worth. It destroys identity. As I walked home that night, tears drying on my cheeks, something hit me. If they won't protect me, I have to protect myself. If they won't help me, I have to help myself. It was the first time in many years that I decided, I may be old, I may be struggling, but I am not done, and I will not spend my last years apologizing for existing. That night, I barely slept. I tossed, turned, stared at the ceiling, feeling crushed, confused, embarrassed, hurt. But morning has a strange way of forcing clarity. When I woke up, the first thing I saw was the note I kept on my refrigerator. It was small, handwritten, something I used to say jokingly to my daughter when she was young. "You are stronger than you think." But that morning, those words felt different. They weren't for her anymore, they were for me. I pulled myself out of bed, put on my worn shoes, and stepped outside. The air was quiet. The streets were almost empty. It felt like the whole world was asleep, except me. I walked slowly, just trying to calm my heart, trying to breathe, trying to understand why people I loved so deeply could treat me so coldly. But somewhere along that walk, something shifted inside me. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what my children needed, or what my grandchildren needed, or how I could make peace or fix things. I was thinking about me, my life, my dignity, my future. As I walked, something hit me. Last night wasn't a humiliation, it was a redirection. Life was not punishing me. Life was forcing me to finally decide, do I live the rest of my years silently accepting disrespect, or do I fight for myself, even if no one stands with me? And I realized, for the first time in a very long time, I deserve better. When I got back home, I didn't sit down to cry. I sat down with a notebook. I made 3 columns: what I absolutely need each month, what I spend, what I can live without. It was ugly to face. It was painful to admit, but I needed to see it clearly. How much money truly came in, how much went out, how much I could reorganize. It wasn't about being rich, it was about regaining control. That notebook became the moment everything changed. I dialed the number of someone I never expected to call, a woman from my building named Linda. She's around my age. We aren't close friends, but we've spoken at the mailbox a few times. She once mentioned she made extra income from home, helping seniors manage daily tasks and bookkeeping. And that morning, for the first time ever, I swallowed my pride and asked Linda, "Do you think you could show me how you do what you do? I need to make some extra money." There was silence. I felt humiliated, even asking. But then she said something that almost made me cry. "Of course, you should have asked sooner. Let me come over tomorrow." That moment gave me something I hadn't felt in years: hope. I realized, the moment we stop waiting for others to save us, we start saving ourselves. The moment we stop expecting love to come from outside, we start developing self-love inside. The moment we stop comparing our situation to others, we start taking control of our own. That morning, I understood. Last night wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new one. Instead of crying over how my children saw no value in me, I chose to create value for myself. Instead of begging for respect, I decided to earn respect from myself first. Instead of being ashamed of my situation, I decided to face it with courage. I looked at myself in the mirror that morning and said something I had never said out loud. "You're not done yet." I will never again apologize for existing, try to prove I deserve love, shrink myself to please others, beg for a seat at anyone's table. If they don't want me there, I'll build my own table. If they don't respect me, I'll respect myself. And that promise, that emotional shift, became the turning point of everything that followed. The call came on a Saturday morning. I was folding laundry, something simple, something peaceful, when I heard the buzzing of my phone on the table. At first, I ignored it, but it kept ringing, so I picked it up, and there it was, my son's name. For a moment, I froze, not with fear, not with anger, but with a kind of caution I had never felt before. I took a deep breath and answered. His voice sounded uneasy, almost shaky. "Mom, we're coming over. We need to talk. Not I want to see you, not we're sorry for what happened, just we need to talk." I didn't ask why. I didn't argue. I just said okay, and then I hung up. I stood in my living room, simply breathing. I looked around at the space I had built, the space I had paid for, the space that sheltered me when they rejected me, and something interesting happened. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't scared. I wasn't desperate to be loved. I was calm, and that calmness was completely new. When their car pulled up, I saw all 3 of them: my son, my daughter-in-law, and my granddaughter. They walked toward the door, slowly, awkwardly, as if they weren't sure what to expect. When I opened the door, they didn't come in immediately. They stood there, uncertain. For once, I wasn't the one feeling unwanted. They were. They entered and sat at the kitchen table, the same table I had once fed them at, laughed with them at, comforted them at. I sat across from them. My granddaughter wouldn't look at me. My daughter-in-law kept her arms crossed. My son stared at his hands like a guilty child. They didn't know how to begin, so I waited. Silence has a way of forcing truth out. Finally my son spoke. "Mom, we need your help. We're in trouble." His voice cracked, just slightly, not with manipulation, but with genuine vulnerability. They had never spoken to me like that. Not as a servant, not as a spare wallet, not as an obligation, but as someone who mattered. Still, I didn't rush to soften their discomfort. Years of disrespect cannot be undone in one moment. He explained everything. The mortgage was overdue. Her medical bills had piled up. The car needed repairs. Their savings were almost gone. They weren't living the comfortable, luxurious life they pretended to have. They were surviving, barely. And I listened, quietly, without judgment, without pity, because for the first time, I understood something. People who feel powerful often depend on someone silently supporting them. They just never notice the support until it's gone. My granddaughter suddenly looked up at me. Her voice wasn't arrogant anymore. There was no smirk, no attitude, just a soft, trembling tone. "Grandma, I'm sorry." And those words hurt me more than the insult she had thrown at me days earlier, because I saw something in her eyes that I never expected. Fear, fear of losing me, fear of realizing she had hurt me more than she ever knew, fear of understanding consequences too late. She wiped her eyes, embarrassed, not because she was caught, but because she felt ashamed. And I understood. She was a child, repeating what adults around her had normalized. It didn't excuse her words, but it explained them, and explanations are where healing begins. I didn't yell. I didn't shame them. I didn't throw everything back at their faces. I calmly said, "I love you all, but I will not be treated like I don't matter." There was silence. Not angry silence, not defensive silence, a silence of realization, a silence of growth. My son finally spoke again. "Mom, what do you want from us?" He expected me to list demands, money, apologies, conditions, but I simply replied, "Respect, that's all." That single word hit them harder than any lecture ever could. Respect, not obedience, not pity, not control, just respect. They didn't argue. They didn't try to justify their behavior. They didn't shift blame. They nodded. All three of them. For the first time, they truly saw me, not as a wallet, not as a babysitter, not as someone disposable, but as a human being with worth. We didn't magically become perfect overnight. We didn't instantly erase all the hurt. But that day, something new was built. Boundaries, clarity, honesty, respect. Real respect, earned, acknowledged, and mutual. And that was the first step toward healing, for all of us. I've always believed apologies should never be forced. A real apology isn't mumbled, manipulative, or designed to get something in return. A real apology is honest, vulnerable, and rooted in understanding. What happened in my living room that week was the first time I experienced a real apology from my own family. After that first conversation, I didn't rush into being close again. I needed space. They needed reflection. For 2 days, we exchanged nothing but short messages. "Hope you're doing okay. Thinking of you. Thanks for listening to us." But on the third day, my son texted, "Mom, can we come over again? We need to talk more." I agreed. Not because I wanted to reopen wounds, but because healing doesn't happen in one scene. It happens in layers. They arrived quietly, without tension, without attitude. And this time, there was no emotional wall between us. When they walked in, my daughter-in-law did something unexpected. She hugged me, not a fake, polite hug, a real one. She stepped forward, wrapped her arms around me, and whispered, "I'm sorry for how we treated you. You didn't deserve it." Those words weren't dramatic. They weren't rehearsed. They were raw, and I felt something lift inside me. Not the weight of anger, but the weight of misunderstanding. After her mom let go, my granddaughter stood there with red eyes. She looked smaller than her age, not because of height, but because of guilt. She didn't try to excuse anything. She said, with her voice shaking, "Grandma, I thought it was okay to talk to you like that because I heard others do it. I didn't know it was hurting you like that. I'm really, really sorry." I didn't interrupt her. I let her finish. Because teaching a child empathy starts by allowing them to express their remorse fully. I placed my hand gently on her cheek, and I said, "You are forgiven, but we never speak to people we love that way again, not even joking." She nodded, almost relieved. It wasn't a dramatic moment, it was a meaningful one. Then my son spoke, and he didn't rush. I could tell he had been thinking, deeply. He took a long breath, like someone walking into truth. "Mom, I didn't realize how dependent we were on you. I took from you without ever asking how you felt. I assumed you'd always be there, no matter how we acted. I'm sorry, and I want to do better. I didn't expect perfection from him. I only wanted sincerity, and that's exactly what he gave me. What I said back to them, I held their hands across the table and spoke as gently as I could. I love you all, and I always will, but love doesn't mean I allow myself to be disrespected. We can support each other, but respect has to go both ways. Nobody argued, nobody deflected blame. They listened, truly listened. And that was more healing than any apology. For the first time in years, we talked honestly about everything. About boundaries, expectations, emotional needs, financial issues, communication, misunderstandings. We didn't fight, we didn't yell, we didn't blame, we understood. Sometimes the real healing isn't found in forgiveness, but in clarity. At the end of that conversation, my son said something I will never forget. "Mom, you're not a nobody. You're the one person we can't replace." And then my granddaughter added softly, "You're the heart of this family." And in that moment, I felt something I had not felt in years. Seen, valued, respected. No, we didn't magically erase every past hurt. We didn't pretend everything was perfect now. We didn't force rushed forgiveness. We simply took the first real steps toward healing, understanding, respect, growth. And that was good enough, because older adults, like us, are often treated as invisible, disposable, replaceable, irrelevant. But the truth is this: families fall apart terribly when they lose the wisdom of their elders. Real apologies aren't given to people you don't care about. They apologized because they realized they couldn't afford to lose me, not financially, not emotionally, not spiritually. Something had changed, not just in them, but in me. For the first time in decades, I stood on equal ground with my own family, not as someone taken advantage of, not as someone overlooked, but as someone respected. After the apologies and honesty settled in, it was time for something even harder: setting the conditions for helping them. You see, forgiveness is one thing, but rebuilding a relationship requires boundaries. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the desperate mother hoping to be accepted. I was a woman who understood her worth. They needed help, and I was willing to give it. But this time, it wouldn't come at the cost of my dignity. A few days later, I invited them over once again. No tension, no yelling, just purpose. We sat down at the very same table that had once been filled with disrespect, but now, that same table carried something new: respect, honesty, and clarity. I looked at my son, my daughter-in-law, and my granddaughter, and I said calmly, "I am willing to help, but first, things must change." They nodded, leaning in with genuine attentiveness. Not defensiveness, not entitlement, just readiness to do better. Condition 1. Respect is non-negotiable. I started with the simplest yet most important condition: respect is required, always, toward me, toward each other, and especially in front of the kids. My son nodded quickly, my daughter-in-law placed her hand over mine, and my granddaughter whispered, "I promise, Grandma, I won't disrespect you again." I didn't need dramatic words, I needed sincerity, and they gave it. Condition 2. I will not carry the entire load. I told them. If I help financially, it's temporary. This is not permanent. You will work toward independence. My son looked me in the eyes and said, "Agreed. We need to build better financial habits. No more wasting, no more pretending." It was the first time I saw him taking real responsibility, not as a son needing rescue, but as a man willing to improve. Condition 3. Communication must change. I told them. We don't go silent for months, and only talk when things fall apart. We communicate regularly, with honesty. My daughter-in-law nodded and said, "We can have weekly check-ins, not about money, just about family, about connection." That sentence alone nearly brought tears to my eyes. Because connection isn't built from emergency, it's built from consistency. Condition 4. Emotional support goes both ways. I looked at them more gently this time. I will support you emotionally, but I will not be the punching bag for stress or frustration. There was silence, not because they disagreed, but because they understood how deeply that had affected me. And my son replied, "We will never unload on you again. We'll talk to you, not at you." Condition 5. I won't be used. I will be involved. This one was important. If I help, I'm not just a wallet or a babysitter. I want involvement, in decisions, in communication, in planning. They agreed without hesitation. I wasn't being needed. I was being included. Condition 6. They must take responsibility. I made this clear. This help comes with accountability. You'll take steps to improve your financial situation. Budgeting, planning, reducing waste. Not excuses. For the first time, my daughter-in-law said, "We should do a monthly budget together, and we want you involved, not to control us, but to guide us." That wasn't just acceptance. That was humility. Finally, I said, "We don't treat anyone like a burden. Not me, not you, not anyone. We solve problems together." My granddaughter looked up at me and asked, "Grandma, can we start spending time together again, just the two of us?" And I said, "Yes. Because family isn't about what we get. It's about who we become to each other." I expected resistance. I expected negotiation. I expected excuses. Instead, they accepted every condition, not grudgingly, not resentfully, but gratefully, because they realized these weren't rules for control. They were rules for love. For the first time in my life, I wasn't settling to be tolerated. I was standing to be respected. And they weren't just hearing me. They were learning from me. Conditions didn't push us apart. They brought us closer. Boundaries didn't break the family. They protected the family. Respect didn't make things uncomfortable. It made things healthier. And for the first time since that painful moment at the dinner table, I felt peace. Not temporary peace. Not fragile peace. Foundational peace. The kind that changes families for generations. When I look back at everything that happened, from the moment my granddaughter called me a nobody, to the day my family learned what true respect meant, I realized something powerful. This story was never about humiliation. It was about awakening, not just theirs, but mine. For years, I stayed quiet. I accepted disrespect because I didn't want conflict. I let boundaries slide because I didn't want to hurt feelings. I gave and gave until I disappeared behind my own generosity. But I learned something. Silence doesn't keep peace. It poisons it. Peace comes from clarity, honesty, and dignity, not endurance, not sacrifice, not silence. You cannot force people to appreciate you. You cannot beg for dignity, but you can't teach it. And the moment I finally demanded respect, not with anger, not with threats, but with calm certainty, everything changed, because we train people on how to treat us by what we accept. I accepted too little for too long. But when I changed my expectations, they changed their behavior. Not because I forced them, but because they finally saw my worth. I didn't want them to apologize so I could feel powerful. I wanted them to apologize because it meant they understood. Apologies don't erase the past, but they open the door to a better future. Healing doesn't require perfection. It requires effort. And that effort changed our relationship forever. Giving and loving are not weaknesses, but giving without boundaries is self-destruction. I used to think love meant sacrifice. Now I know, love without self-respect becomes self-neglect. And that is not love at all. By setting conditions, I didn't push my family away. I invited them to grow with me. And they did. Some people believe older adults become irrelevant. But the truth is the opposite. Our age is our strength. Our wisdom is our treasure. Our experiences are our legacy. We do not fade with time. We deepen. We are the memory keepers, the history carriers, the backbone of our families. And when we finally stand in that strength, people around us rise. Family isn't always perfect. Family isn't always gentle. Family isn't always careful. But family can grow. Family can change. Family can learn. And that is exactly what mine did. The day they apologized wasn't the day they fixed everything. It was the day they opened their hearts. And I opened mine. If there's one lesson I hold closest, it's this. You cannot control how others treat you, but you can control what you will allow. And when you stand strong in your value, you teach others to value you too. If anyone watching this video has ever been overlooked, ignored, dismissed, shouted down, disrespected, treated like a burden, know this. You matter. You are not disposable. You are not a nobody. You are not forgotten. You are the heart of your family, the root of your lineage, the foundation of generations. And your worth is not determined by how others speak to you. Your worth is permanent, powerful, unshakable. All you need to do is own it. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or treated like you don't matter, know this: you are not a nobody. Your voice, your love, and your wisdom are priceless, and your family needs to see it. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to give you a shout out in my next video. And if you want to hear more stories and lessons about standing strong, finding respect, and living with dignity, subscribe and turn on notifications. Your best years are not behind you. They're just beginning. Remember, respect starts with you. Stand tall, speak clearly, and never let anyone make you feel like you're a nobody.